And welcome back. Just a very quick, short break. I'm back, Alex Dow, alongside Barish here as well. Looking forward to our top four match. We're going to be bringing Patrick Landis back into our feature match, and he'll be facing another player who's featured a couple of times already, Pedro Torres.
Such an impressive run from Pedro. We saw him before on stream. We saw him before in different events. He finished third at Walls before. He's a force to reckon here in Europe, right? He's coming back to those regionals, performing quite well, and you see himself enjoying himself here on the stage for his top four game. He's just I was talking to him prior to this. I saw him advance into top four. I was like, "Congratulations, Pedro! How are you feeling about your top four game?" And he was looking over to Patrick playing against Alexander. I was like, "Well, I will either play Vikavolt, which is very hard to play with that Lost Box, or I have the QRAM with the Empoleon line as well, which makes it also awkward to play against." So he was not particularly happy about the potential matchups coming up, but he said he would favor the QRAM VMAX match, and I'm looking forward to see how that plays out here.
Yeah, definitely. And alongside that Empoleon as well, I think Pedro, I've also had a chance to talk to him off camera. Patrick also plays the Collapsed Stadium, so if Pedro's starting to put damage around the different parts of the very strong Pokemon Vs and the VMAXs, using Collapsed Stadium to sort of remove those Pokemon out of play gives Patrick almost like a healing option against a deck which typically won't take one-hit knockouts until the latter stages of the game with that Radiant Charizard.
Absolutely. If I remember correctly, Pedro is actually playing against this specific matchup, or this specific player actually, in Lille. He had a great start, I think 5-1-1, but then didn't quite close it out. Lost two win-and-ends, both against QRAM VMAX with the Empoleon lines. I think Patrick might have played two Empoleons in Lille. At least that's what Pedro told me. He was facing a very hard time against a double Empoleon line. So he's back to one. We saw that on stream before. Game actually started with a double mulligan. Both players failed to find a basic Pokemon.
Yeah, but despite having plenty of basics from both sides. But it'll be really interesting to see how this matchup plays out. You know, both players seasoned professionals, Patrick himself having many great, excellent finishes in both regionals, international championships, and also at Worlds as well. So again, like I mentioned, very experienced, both of them. Not new to the kind of pressure of being in a feature match. We've had them a couple of times now each, which is fantastic to see. So we'll look to see how this match plays out, who will be going into our finals and then battling it out to become our regionals Warsaw champion.
Absolutely. And the second chance to find a basic, I think Pedro might have failed again. Yep, showing all single cards. I like Pedro's the way he not only sequences, but the way he plays the cards and making sure that he reduces the potential of any mistakes here. You just want to clarify, listen, by playing down one card at a time, he's like, I actually don't have any basic Pokemon. It's not that I maybe had a double card and didn't see it or anything. The same thing with Flower Selection. You would see Pedro picking up two cards from his deck, putting them out, seeing hey, this is two cards, then looking at those two cards. And it just, it's very nice to follow, very easy to follow for both players and the judges to see that there's nothing going.
Yeah, definitely. If anyone wants to take any sort of anything away from how Pedro plays his deck, you know, it's very clean. It's very clear cut, as you've mentioned, Barish. Just to be able to kind of follow along. You know, there's no fanning of the drawing of cards where we've accidentally seen a couple of mistakes here and there. We've seen many mistakes before. This is an easy count showing to the cameras, and it's just easy to follow, not just for everyone at home, but also for himself. You know, making sure that he's also making not minimal mistakes so that he can continue forward and actually, you know, continue to compete at the top level. As you can see, he's just putting out his prizes there. Doesn't look like anything crazy. Sort of just one-offs of the many higher counts of his deck. That Magma Basin could be quite useful when he's trying to power up a Radiant Charizard in the earlier stages. Got given opportunity there to get that Fire Energy attached. But we do start our game one of top four. Pedro versus Patrick here. It looks like Pedro's going to be starting. He's drawn for the start and is now using Flower Selecting.
Absolutely. We have seen some of these ability markers. I like how his ability marker is actually Comfy itself, and he has two of them. Looks great, especially when you use Flower Select as your main ability throughout the tournament. Great little touch there. Yeah, first Flower Selection. I haven't actually had the chance to see which two cards there was.
He's just managing his hand at the moment, making sure he's selecting the right cards. Maybe a bit of a tough one. typically will be, if you have to spend a bit of time thinking about it, there's a scoop up net going and a battle VIP pass.
Yeah, we actually talked about poker faces and emotions and showing off. Like I think we showed one game on stream where someone was picking up the Dunsparce from the prize and got quite excited, and then got mornied right into that.
That was Christian in one of our earlier games.
Exactly. With Pedro, I feel like he's not pretending, but he's looking like he has a really hard time every single time. Every single decision looks like it is the game deciding one for him. So it's really hard for his opponent to actually make a read on what the selection or what the hand cards could actually look like.
Yeah, definitely. Always looks a little bit stressed, but we know it's just because he's having to think about all of his turns, not just his current turn, but how he's going to play out maybe turn 2, turn 3. Of course, that changes depending on how he gets cards from the flower selecting and other cards like Chorus's Experiment. You know, you have to be able to react and adapt your game plan based on some of the random variances that you get from drawing cards. But we do see the Battle VIP pass very quickly picking out another Comfey and, of course, that very efficient attacker in Cramorant with that Lost Provisions ability, being able to attack with no energy cost if there are 4 Lost Zone cards in the Lost Zone for the current player. So, you know, really looking to try and maybe apply some pressure. You know, that Kyurem VMAX, 330 HP, very hard to knock out from Pedro's side.
Absolutely, and the wash energy also coming into effect potentially there because it prevents effects, so you couldn't actually lost mine and deal damage on that Kyurem, so it gets even harder to knock out. You really only have the Spit Innocently option there, potentially setting up a late KO with the Charizard, of course. We see one Fire Energy heading the discard. We saw the Radiant Charizard in his deck with his first deck search, of course. Magma Basin being prized, especially higher up in the prizes, less likely to be drawn early on, will reduce the chance to attack early on with a Charizard. You mentioned that just a while ago. So yeah, it is interesting to see Lost Zone counter currently at 2. Both Comfeys used. We saw that he had to discard Scoop Up Net to get his Battle VIP pass, so now it's less likely to be able to retreat or pick up the Comfeys and go for another one. So he ends his turn with 2 flower selections and a Lost Zone counter at 2.
Yeah, pretty good start in all honesty. Has the mana feed down as well, trying to limit that opportunity for Patrick to use that Radiant Greninja and Moonlight Shuriken to be able to deal 90 damage to 2 opposing Pokemon. Of course, with Pedro's side, board and bench sort of filled with sort of lower HP Pokemon, that's obviously a threat to his kind of setup. So, you know, targeting and making sure he has that mana feed down to prevent that with his ability is fantastic there. So Patrick, you know, equals Pedro's start, has a Battle VIP pass himself. Again, in his prizes, nothing too crazy. A couple of Water Energies, a couple of the 4-ofs, or the Iridas are 3 of, but it's just a 1 copy, and the Boss's Order as well. But again, towards the bottom, he's going to be hoping to try and pick that up quite early.
Yeah, you talked about the Mulan Shuriken. It's actually quite important in those single prize decks that ideally you get the chance to pick up more than 1 KO at a turn, and Moonlight Shuriken would be one option to do that. However, as you mentioned, mana fees taking away that option, which leaves Patrick no other choice than actually taking 6 knockouts overall. So he has to declare 6 attacks to get through all his prize cards here. Can take quite a while, but his bulky Pokemon can take a lot of damage. And you mentioned a collapsed stadium. So if you have a bench of 5 Pokemon, you can actually, or you have to more so, discard one of these. So if Pedro decides to focus maybe on one benched Pokemon, Patrick could decide to choose to play the stadium in the right moment and just discard that Kyurem VMAX with potentially up to 300 damage to just get rid of all of it.
Yeah, exactly. And we have Patrick here. We had Pedro actually just very quickly handing over that Greninja token to make sure both players and us following the stream and people at home are able to understand when that Concealed Cards ability has been used. But Patrick's just continuing through his turn at the moment, using that Irida to pick up a Capacious Bucket, get a couple more energies into their hand, sort of thin out his deck, increase those odds of picking up really important cards for him to kind of combo and sort of find the right attackers there. So it's just kind of interesting to see what Patrick will be able to do. Does eye up that Empoleon V as well, trying to limit the amount of flower selectings from Pedro's side, and also limiting that Cramorant to not being able to attack because it will need the energies because that ability being blocked.
Absolutely. I don't think anything out of the ordinary so far. Pedro with his setup and Patrick with this. We see the Kyurem, Palkia, Empoleon, the Radiant Greninja and the Oranguru. So it's basically all pieces he needs really, and he still has one spot open. There could be a potential Crobat to pull more cards, or Luminion later on in the game. So he has that free bench space. He actually used Oranguru's ability to top deck, or like to draw the top deck card and put one on top. So potentially, if like Pedro would choose to play a Mani, which is not the preferred choice early on, you would probably go for that Colorless Experiment to increase your Lost Zone counter. But yeah, sometimes an important card that you want to make sure that you have for next turn can't be Mani'd away, is a way to play that Oranguru.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess just Patrick having that Empoleon on the bench means it limits Pedro just having to not use an escape rope. There's a 4 in his deck. Which means that as soon as that escape rope is going to be used, he's going to expect Patrick to be promoting that Empoleon to limit what he could do from his side of the board. So we are up to now 4 after this flower selecting, which does activate the Cramorant's Lost Provisions ability. So yeah, Patrick's also supporting us there by giving us the little die to say that it's going to be going up to 4 following this decision. There's the one that goes in, which is the Echoing Horn. Which again is quite a useful card, but you know, with the constant amount of Collapse Stadium and maybe believing that Colress Experiment was also part of that flower selecting as well. So there's the 5, making sure he hasn't drawn extra, only sees the 5 cards, now mulling over his options in terms of how he can play out his turn. Yeah,
he actually started the game by top decking the Marnie, which would be one potential way to start the game. But then, thanks to the second flower selection, has to discard the Echoing Horn, but gets access to Colorless Experiment, increasing the Lost Zone counter, of course, but on top of that, also getting access to 3 more cards. So he takes the time to make sure that he's discarding the right 2 cards, ideally the right 2 cards, and looking at his hand, making sure that he has all the options. There's a Colorless Experiment and is that a Clara going into the discard pile. Clara, of course, one way to recycle energy and basic Pokemon back. One way typically players choose to attack multiple times with a Charizard. Later in the game, when the attack cost is already reduced, attack once, then maybe sacrifice the Charizard, bring it back with Clara. That option is less likely now because one Clara hit the Lost Zone. The other one, however, should still be in the deck.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess here Pedro's just eyeing up a different target with that cross switcher. Wants to start putting damage on that Kyurem V, which is a really good option here, knowing that it's going to have to deal with 330 HP at some point. Now getting the Cramorant in the active spot does get the Sableye down as well. So we'll be looking just to start chipping away at this big Pokemon. Of course, unlikely to also find a way to retreat itself because it's also quite a big, bulky Pokemon, and similar to the VMAX, the V having a free retreat cost as well. Free, colorless free retreat cost, not for free. Making sure that I'm clarifying that for the viewers as well. So there, just dealing the 110, start applying that pressure, Lost Zone to 6. And we're seeing that Sableye getting ready for action as well.
Yeah, concealed cards once again helps to setting up the discard pile with more water energies and drawing more cards. And with this big hand, there's a quite big chance actually. There's a quick ball coming. I was going to say maybe an Ultra Ball to get one of the evolution Pokemon or an evolution sense. But the quick ball, we talked about this earlier, could potentially get you Luminion, which could get you an Irida, which could get you water Pokemon. So quite a few options there. Could also get you an item, which could be the Ultra Ball to get you any of the evolutions there. So he is eyeing out an Irida. We see then Escape Rope and the Luminion. Yeah, that's exactly what he's going for. Luminion, Irida, Escape Rope, and is that a Palkia V-Star? That seems like a Palkia V-Star.
Yeah, it does look like a Palkia V-Star, sort of getting ready to maybe put itself in a position where to support, as it has done a lot of the times, although is an efficient attacker in itself, just requiring 2 energies, does typically act as a bit of a support Pokemon for that big Kyurem VMAX to be able to take big knockouts. In this scenario, though, it may not be necessary.
Yeah, I do wonder if he brings up his Palkia as an attacker or potentially the Empoleon. He has 2 energies in the discard pile, plus potentially 1 in the hand. However, he chooses that Palkia V-Star is his preferred attacker.
Yeah, there's the escape rope, and there's the collapsed stadium already wiping away 110 damage, sort of resetting the board and really putting Patrick again in a better position. All of that chip damage will have to be redone once again. Also with Patrick potentially taking the first knockout here because he's going to try and get an energy onto the active. Does use the Star Portal ability and now looking for some maximum value with 1, 2. Is it just 2 or is it 3
I think
there?
it's just 2 energies.
Just 2 energies, so not full maximizing of value there, but, you know, efficient enough to get those attacks off and start taking prizes.
Yeah, you get the first knockout. You also have Empoleon with 1 energy charged up, potentially a Melanie, plus a second manual attachment also gets Empoleon up. I was interested to see that potentially promoting the Empoleon is able to take the knockouts on the single price attackers as well, plus shutting off the abilities. So interested to see what was potentially going through Patrick's mind and made him actually choose the Palkia as his attacker.
Yeah, I mean, it's also one of those Pokemon which, you know, because of that ability that it has, kind of allows bringing up those energies into the board first. Also won't be going down to anything necessarily with 280 HP, and right now with the Charizard not quite activated yet through its ability and its attack, so it would do 250 damage with its Combustion Blast, but that Excited Heart helps to allow its attacks to have 1 less colorless costing for each prize card your opponent's taken. So right now, instead of the 1 fire and 4 colors, it's 1 fire and 3 colorless, which is still a little bit short. We'll need to take a couple more prizes to maybe push it into a Magma Basin area, or potentially taking 4 before it just requires that 1 fire energy to really deal some big damage.
Yeah, absolutely. Charizard, a big factor to factor, like a big Pokemon, big attack there to factor in for later on in the game. We see a manual attachment, withdrawing, and trying to go for another Spit Innocently, another 110 damage on the board. Of course, Collapsed Stadium, we saw that removing that Kyurem with the damage, but since the stadium now is in play, you would have to find a way to get rid of the stadium, maybe with a Lost Vacuum, then play a second stadium to take advantage of that mechanic again.
Yes, of course, and like I said, Pedro's side of the board does play 2 Path to the Peak. So again, he has the potential outs that we've mentioned before, why Kyurem could sometimes not be as strong generally, particularly if Pedro could find a way to remove the energy from the board as well by taking a bit of a knockout and also using Roxanne Path to kind of disrupt Patrick's side of the board. We've seen Kyurem just struggle because of that, but it's gone back and forth very quickly after that Spit Innocently, and Patrick's just very simply just announced Subspace Swell, taking another prize, going down to 4 prizes now to Pedro still having 6 remaining, and it's just passed back over, and Flower selecting is the first one with an easy choice.
Battle VIP pass getting off in the Lost Zone, bring it up to 8. Because he's not playing any of the Giratina, he's less likely to have a copy of Mirage Gate either, so 7 or 8 is not really that important. We're looking at 4 to activate the Cramorant, which we already saw, and then we need the 10 to have Sableye as an attacker, so it's still 2 more cards have to go into the Lost Zone for Pedro to be able to use that attack and start spreading damage. It's also important, like the active Palkia V-Star already is damaged. Looking at the deck list of Patrick, he's not featuring any big charm there to increase the HP, so already damaged, he will fall down to that Combustion Blast that we talked about. On the other side, spreading some damage to make sure that you can pick up knockouts on other Pokemon. However, Patrick removed the Kyurem, so only really has Pokemon that would all go down to that attack from Charizard.
Yeah, interesting choice here. It looks like there was an escape rope played by Pedro. And then now, of course, as I mentioned, it was a bit of a worry to know that that Empoleon V was just kind of sat there waiting to come up into the active position. Patrick does have an air balloon in the active spot as well. Another way of sort of causing issues just by getting the disruption in on Pedro's side of the board with that Empoleon V, but then also being able to retreat back out and continue applying pressure and attacking. As mentioned, Pedro does have the Path to the Peak as well, so that's another way of shutting off that Emperor's Eyes ability. So it'll be interesting to see how this works out, because he has gone for the Charizard. Maybe he's just thinking, I can put this down, I can use it as a bit of a bait, and really sort of allow them to continue applying pressure that way. Maybe thinking Patrick will be like, oh, I want to take out that Charizard because that's the threat. But he does play the money. He was playing down cards as well, making sure that he's able to find a Charizard. Of course, still has a Clara in his deck somewhere.
Absolutely. We see the money being played. 5 fresh cards for Pedro here. Getting rid of that collapsed stadium also allowed Pedro to fill up his bench again, having more space for his second Sableye to make sure that he has the constant threat of dealing 12 damage counters on the opposing side, even if he loses one of them, and is bringing in Charizard into play. It's quite early, but you also force the opponent to make sure that he maybe gusts it up and takes it out early on. Otherwise, you can start charging it up and then potentially attack even earlier than the typical 2 prizes left for your opponent.
Yeah, both players just making sure that it's also clarified for themselves, the judges, and also the stream viewers at home that that collapsed stadium has been lost zoned because of the lost vacuum that Pedro played before benching down all to the full 5 Pokemon again. But this opens up again, additionally, for Patrick to be able to use another collapsed stadium and remove that Palkia V-Star off his bench, just nullifying any of the damage that's already been done. So interesting. It's one of those things Pedro's had to play to kind of get the board set up as he has done, and now just kind of mulling over options. And there we go. We see Patrick there having to be used with another escape rope straight into the other Comfey by Pedro's side of the board. And there's the first flower selecting that we'll see following the money, and now that Emperor Eyes is not in the active position.
Yeah, it was great double usage of that escape rope. And now his lost zone count is up to 10. He has access. He needs 1 psychic energy, though, that I don't see in his hand as of right now. There's another scoop up net, so he potentially has 1 more option to go for another flower select and maybe find the badly needed psychic energy. On top of that, he would also need a way to retreat the active Comfey to then be able to start attacking with the Sableye. Considering the Palkia has 110 damage, 170 remaining, so you would have to think about where to place your damage, potentially setting up the Palkia for another Spit Innocently KO, currently, so placing maybe 60 damage counters on that, and then spreading the rest over the board.
Yeah, a number of options available for Pedro, and it would be interesting to see exactly what he's thinking right now. Did just take the path to the peak with that flower selecting, choosing to put the fire energy into the lost zone. That's likely why he's happy to play with the escape rope again. Will likely to play down the path to the peak, stopping that Emperor's Eyes. Now we'll use another flower selecting to try and figure out a next turn game plan.
It's quite interesting how the dynamic works out. So Empoleon blocks abilities from basic Pokemon that don't have rule boxes. Path of the Peak blocks abilities from Pokemon with rule boxes. So Path of the Peak blocks Empoleon's ability that now no longer blocks Comfey's ability. Gives them access to 1 more card, but...
Yeah, so at this stage, I think it was just a pass back over. Patrick doesn't have access to the Radiant Greninja, so can't draw additional cards now. So it does look like he's just using and paying retreat with a manual attachment to the active Empoleon there. And as you can see, the Palkia V-Star coming back into the active spot, and then a following energy retrieval to pick those energies back out of the discard pile. Sort of trying to apply the pressure. Oranguru, able to use his ability under the spell of Path to the Peak, just to kind of give a bit more options and a bit more sort of visibility to some of the information Patrick may need. So Patrick's there just kind of eyeing up a few options before he plays out his turn.
The only thing I'm a bit worried about it on Patrick's side is that he doesn't have a second attack already. There's no Kyurem, there's no second Palkia. So if Pedro finds a way to attack the Charizard, which actually gets gusted up and knocked out here, but if he finds a way to take out the Palkia anytime soon, and Patrick doesn't have the option for a second attacker that would potentially buy Pedro the time to attack twice or multiple times and sets up KOs and gets those prize cards. Because currently, looking at the prize cards, Patrick down to 3, so he needs to announce 3 more attacks. His Palkia currently not in danger to be taken out, with still 170 HP. Charizard needs to be taken out of the discard pile and would need 2 energies to attack, actually. So not quite that easy to set up either in this turn yet. We see a Colress experiment. So we talked about the maximum loss counter. I think it was 1450 maybe. Could easily break that record on stream here.
Could easily surpass that number. Again, lots of different options and selection options. Pedro not looking too pleased with the couple of options there. Looks like a Psychic Energy and another card obviously has to be important at this point. Does have the Chorus Experiment and it looks like a Clara in hand as well. Has to choose the Psychic Energy because of how much he values this card into his hand, which is the Cramorant, because he's going to want to be able to attack without having to force too many other issues. Does already have a Psychic in hand, however, as well. So there's a few things that he could look to try and do, but wants to start off with a Chorus Experiment. But just kind of, again, gaining more information, looking for additional cards that will allow him to get out of that active spot and maybe use something like the Cramorant to attack with.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. We, in the past, saw a lot of decks that actually go through their deck quite fast and reduce their, like, discard a lot of cards, draw this card, draw this card. This deck is actually currently at like Lost Zone 15 after the Colress, so they can actually afford to send 15 cards, a quarter of their deck, into Lost Zone, no access to it anymore, and still work, still succeed, which is quite impressive here. Only working with 3/4 of your deck, really.
Yeah, so really interesting there. There's a choice spell that just gets discarded into the Lost Zone from the Chorus Experiment. Does hold on to that escape rope as well. He's got to start thinking about if he uses that, it means he'll be likely attacking a different Pokemon other than this Palkia in this active position, which I believe he has played. And Patrick's just mulling over which Pokemon should take this damage right now. Of course, Pedro will be looking to try and find a way to take 2 prize knockouts, so Patrick, yes, goes for the single prize Greninja in that active spot, but Pedro, of course, with that Sableye in play, that ability to use Lost Mine attack and put 12 damage counters on any of his opponents' side of the board. And
this is what we talked about earlier. Pedro looking like he's having such a hard time, but finding every piece he needs, having that energy, but playing the escape rope first to, like, giving Patrick this one extra decision to make, hey, what do I promote, and does my opponent even have the option to attack with the Sableye? So keeping that behind one extra little tiny detail there. So now Pedro will announce the Lost Mine attack, and we'll think about how to spread the 12 damage counters.
Yeah, he's got to work this out sort of very cleverly, because, you know, he has to be thinking about that collapsed stadium again. He knows Patrick plays that multiple collapsed stadium, so he's just thinking about putting some damage on that Palkia V-Star, sort of start putting it in additional range for further attacks. We'll look to maybe just try and spread some of the damage there across some of the other V Pokemon. Typically that Lumineon is quite easy to knock out with only 180 HP. So wouldn't be surprised, I believe, if that is that a 60 or 50 on there at the moment. So it'd be interesting to see. Oh, it's only, of course, it's only 170 HP. Apologies for that. Makes it even easier, already in range from another Lost Mine attack.
Absolutely. Not only Lost Mine, but we saw that Pedro also has the Cramorant in hand, so a Spit Innocently could also take out these Pokemon. On top of that, I think we saw 1 cross switcher in Pedro's hand, potentially even 2, and if not, then he has ways to access the second cross switcher and then gust up one of the bench Pokemon to take the knockout there as well. So this game quite going on for almost 25 minutes, but still very much open to grab for both players. Pedro hasn't taken any prize cards yet, but he's going for the long setup, making sure that he's spreading out the damage, and he still has the option to go for the Clara Charizard play and deal 250 damage.
Yeah, there comes a second Oranguru coming onto the board right now. Of course, they're quite susceptible to a Lost Mine as well, with 120 HP. I got a little bit mixed around with the Lumineon and the Crobat, which is why, just a little bit tricky. Be careful around that fan drawing that some players do. One of those little techniques that you try and avoid a little bit, just to make sure you don't overdraw cards. And the table judge just having a quick word there. It's one of those few things we want to make sure that everything's okay. You know, just want to make sure all our games are as clean and as easy as possible without having to worry too much about it. So just maybe just getting a little bit reprieve and just having a quick conversation there. As we discussed, the next Pedro, of course, is just watching. Everything's fine from his side, other than, you know, potentially that chance there that Patrick may have seen another card, but he did look like he gestured both. Whether he actually flashed it or saw it is coming down to subjective views. But anyway, moving back, just talking about the game a little bit more. We're in this scenario. Everything seems good as far as I understand it. So just back with Patrick to ensure we are able to continue this game and just see if Patrick can continue taking some prizes. He's already taken 3, which puts him very much ahead in this matchup.
Yeah, he currently needs to find a way to retreat the active Pokemon, to have an option to attack with any of the, like with the Palkia on the bench, of course. If he doesn't have a way to retreat yet, that would just give Pedro another chance to deal more damage, spread more damage. I think we looked at the Luminion, which would be 1 Lost Mine away from being knocked out. So that would be 2 prize cards for Pedro. So he starts setting them up, but it seems like the judges are still making a decision on this. We talked about how the game is self-sufficient and the players are both taking care. And the games is like self-sufficient, both players making sure that everything is according to the rules. And we saw that Pedro was absolutely fine, but the judges is still there to make sure that everything is going right. We're currently in the top 4 after like 16 rounds already played, which is quite impressive. And of course, there's a lot on the line, right? We're talking about regional championships, not only the title, but championship points to grab for the whole season, to qualify for Worlds, to qualify for stipends. And of course, there's also a lot of money on the line.
Yeah, there's so much on the line for both players. Even just to be able to hopefully, you know, just call themselves the first regional champion in Warsaw in the Masters division, which would be a fantastic achievement. Like I said, it's been a fantastic event so far. Of course, there's so many rounds, as you've already mentioned. Players are going to be susceptible a little bit to maybe some fatigue, a lot more pressure again. But, you know, we know both of these players are very experienced, very well playing, and just sort of confirming right now. Just some of the judges going to be confirming the right decision based on what's currently been going on. But just and from the meantime, you know, we've seen this matchup. It's gone very back and forth. Currently still in game 1. We know how long it's already gone.
Yes.
We've seen many games go to time so far. So it's such an intriguing sort of mind battle between the two.
Yeah, I actually want to use this opportunity to give a shout out to the amazing professor and staff community that is working behind the scenes and also making all these big events possible. They're working so hard the whole weekend. I've been in this role myself a couple of times at big events, small events, have hosted local events myself, and the dedication and the love they have for the game and the community is amazing, and seeing them making all these events possible. If it wasn't for the players and judges coming all together at this weekend, we couldn't celebrate Pokemon the way we do.
Yeah, this is one of the few times I've had a fantastic opportunity to be part of it as well. You know, really seeing the other side as a typical player in the game, in the competitive scene. So it's really, really impressive to see like all the hard work, all of the kind of time and dedication people put into it. You see it's an amazing event, amazing production. You've seen loads of different things, not just from the casting as well, but also the different little middle videos and different editing that we've had to go through to make sure this production is as good as possible, not just for the people here, but for you guys to enjoy back at home.
Absolutely. I've been following the streaming scene in Europe for quite a while. I've started streaming video game tournaments, regionals, and just the level of production value that Card Sports Leagues is putting on here, like just looking around, seeing this venue, seeing this setup, seeing like all the casters, Pokemon Go, soon hopefully Pokemon video game will join us as well. Just like the immense value that we have added, and I hope you guys at home can enjoy and follow the action live at these events.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an amazing thing to see, and you know, we've still got the rest of this match to go. We've still got the final to go as well. Looking to try and see where we are up to with the rest of the bracket. Of course, just a reminder of who's in current top 4. Alex Szymanski, who went into day 2, I believe, undefeated with his record, still facing up against Yuri Hoot to make it into a place in the final. And of course, currently we're showing Patrick Landis versus Pedro Eugenio Torres, again looking for that spot in the finals to kind of battle it out for all those different prizes, all that prize money and all those support as well, and just that title of regional champion for this 2022-2023 season.
Absolutely. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we haven't actually casted Jory yet this weekend, so he made it all the way to the semifinals and avoided the stage so far, so maybe we get the privilege to cast one of his games in the finals if he's able to defeat the I believe he might have taken 1 loss, but the potentially undefeated Alex Szymanski. Yeah,
we just wanted to also showcase our wonderful graphics there that's been set up and produced by the production team, also showcasing just how things have changed in the same format. So towards the earlier part of the format where we had Lille Regionals, which was won, of course, by Mew VMAX, going into look how spread out that Lille pie chart is, and then we move into Warsaw where we have 2 dominant decks.
Yeah, 2 dominant decks taking over more than half of the field really of our day 2 competition here, with 75 players playing it out, battling it out, making sure their way to top 8. We've brought it down to like 8 players. We played through top 8. And we're now at the top 4. I think the decks, I'm not quite sure what Yuri is running, but we have seen Alex Szymanski's deck, we have seen Pedro's deck, and of course we are featuring Patrick right now.
No, it'll be a fantastic opportunity to maybe showcase Yuri as well. I mean, having to play the same amount of rounds, getting all the way to top 8 at the same time. So hopefully there'll be a fantastic opportunity to do so. Of course, that is dependent on getting past Alex Szymanski's lost toolbox deck as well, that we've already seen. That we've seen numerous times already on the feature matches. So it'll be really, really interesting to see how we can progress through. Hopefully we can go back to the action shortly as well. Just making sure, again, that final decision is happy with everyone on the tables and the table judges as well. This is the reason why we have officials there.
Yeah, I would actually like to hear from the chat a little bit. What of the 4 remaining decks you are looking forward to see, potentially taking it home this weekend? Who's your favorite of the remaining 4 players? And maybe like tweet at us with hashtag Pokémon Warsaw Regionals actually. Play Pokémon always picked up as well. You can tweet at us at LimitlessTGC. We've been following all the tweets, making sure to interact with the people as well. So that's a great way to let us know what you think. And of course in chat, yeah, you can always let us know how you feel about the tournament going right now.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm for you guys that Yuri is actually also playing one of those big decks of our meta currently. He's playing that Palkia Inteleon deck, very much so that we've seen numerous times again over this weekend. You know, again, showcasing that it's one of the best decks that has been in the format. It's one of those decks that everyone has fallen back to on numerous occasions. We saw it from the very start when we saw Zach Lesage pilot it to a day 2 finish as well. So it's been an amazing deck which has kind of stuck around, has great matchups or good matchups across the board, and just in the hands of the right player will go very far.
Yeah, and I see like one tech card that I might not want to reveal yet, but maybe if he's making it into finals, that card may play a big role in that Inteleon Palkia line. Yeah, looking at that, I do wonder how players are doing at the table right now. Judges are reviewing the footage as well. Head judges are involved, so they're taking care on the table. They're doing their best they can.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, both players, as I mentioned, very experienced. They know if there is any sort of miscommunication or any sort of decisions that need to be made. They're making the right decisions in terms of just if they have to appeal it to the head judge, they're happy to do so and happy to kind of discuss and walk through those decisions that are happening during the game right now. It's one of those things which we actively encourage. If there's something that you're unsure of, make sure if you ever come to join a Play Pokemon tournament or event and there's anything unsure of, the judges are there and the judge team are there to support and help as well. So it's a fantastic resource to kind of utilize to make sure we come to the right decision, and we're just there confirming exactly what's happening there. The card was we don't want to discuss it too much until we get full confirmation, but the head judge is there. Both the judges on the table are also very experienced TCG players as well, so you know we'll come to the right decision. Both the players are sort of discussing exactly the actions and things going on right now, but we'll come to a point where hopefully we'll come to the right decision. And everything looks to be agreed with going forward soon anyway. Yeah,
it does make me wonder if we can maybe use our field camera to look into the second top 4 game that is still going on, of course, offside, off stream as well. Yep. Maybe get an idea, a glimpse of the current action, getting an idea from the judges there in game 1, game 2, how far they're doing. And of course, we have people all around the world. Most European players might be here actually playing, so the viewers might potentially be more US based, and we could potentially see people rooting for Alex, so they might want to know how he's doing in the second semifinal.
any opportunity, we'll try and bring as much information as soon as we get it from our people on the ground here. But it was an interesting opportunity there to kind of zoom straight in to Alex in the middle of a turn. Just kind of seeing the action, the amount of intensity that players have to go through. Okay, so we're just getting confirmation right now that there will be a double prize penalty for Patrick. That's probably why it was maybe appealed a bit to the head judge to kind of confirm what the penalty might be. What that means is it's something we've seen a little bit before, unfortunately, but it does mean Pedro will have to take 2 less prizes to potentially take game 1.
Absolutely, and we talked about how one potential knockout is already set up with the damage on that Luminion, with the damage on the Palkia. So only having to go through 4 prize cards, which is 2 knockouts, could be the Luminion and the Palkia that I just mentioned, makes it a little bit easier for Pedro. But we can't deny that Patrick is still in a very commanding position, ready to take out another Pokemon there and take his 4th prize card.
Yeah, and there you go. So Patrick has taken a 4th prize with that manual attachment to that Greninja to retreat out of that position there. Pedro will now be just identifying his route of victory because he only needs to take 2 knockouts here. And that Luminion on the bench does look like an easy target right now, as does the active Palkia V-Star. But just to kind of remind our viewers at home, for those who don't know, our rules have changed over the years around sort of prize penalties. So we used to actually have to take the prizes. Now we don't, because sometimes it can lead to an advantage of certain cards being played. An example is the Radiant Charizard. You know, if for example, it was the other way around, if Patrick had to take those prizes, it may activate the Pedro's Radiant Charizard quicker than usual and sort of anticipate that. Or we used to have cards such as N, which allows us to kind of have a bit of a comeback mechanic, an unfortunate comeback mechanic at times. This way, it keeps the game as fair as possible going forward, but we just wanted to highlight that to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Good point there. You could accidentally, or you could have, actually, let me go back to the game, seeing a Clara being played. 4 cards, I think it was a Sableye, Charizard, a Psychic Energy and a Fire Energy.
Yeah.
We see Cramorant in the field as well. And one more thing to consider though. Pedro actually played Path to the Peak himself. Which means
of course.
he does not have access to Charizard's ability, reducing the attack cost. So Charizard is actually not an attacker as of right now. Looking at the discard pile, and I do wonder if he still has access to the Lost Vacuum. And of course, Patrick would not want to play the Collapsed Stadium. It's a 2-edged sword, right?
Yeah,
yes,
definitely.
you get one of your bench Pokemon off the bench, especially a damaged one, but at the same time, you give Pedro the option to play the Charizard.
Yeah.
However, had he played that earlier and the bench would already be at 4, it would also be too full to get another Charizard in play.
Yeah, 100%. That's a fantastic point there. Lots of little things, micro decisions that has to be made. Pedro will likely know that he has a Lost Vacuum and the Magma Basin in his prizes. Unlikely to take them because they're at the top. Also, just now needing 2 final prizes to be taken to be able to take this game 1 because of the double prize penalty. Patrick will need to still announce 2 more attacks to go through single prizes to be able to take this game. But Pedro does seem like he's been fortunate to get into a position where now he has a chance of actually taking game 1 despite that kind of slower start, which we didn't anticipate.
Yeah, actually looking at the damage counter on that Palkia, it is 170 damage, so 110 HP left. Both Cramorant and Sableye would get the knockout in the next turn. That's something to keep in mind, of course, which makes it really hard for Patrick to play around that knockout in the next turn. That's very tricky, of course. Pedro only needs 1 more knockout. So yeah, Patrick in a quite precarious situation here.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a number of things that needs now to be considered by Patrick. So he's going to want to try and find a way not to have to attack, obviously, with this Palkia V-Star. You know, it's unfortunate that he has to consider maybe finding a way to use that Collapsed Stadium to just get it out, but then doesn't have an attacker on board, something you've mentioned already before, but then also activating that Charizard. So it's a precarious position, and I think Patrick's just kind of seen that he's not able to go either route of victory at this stage, so does just scoop up his cards and actually goes to Pedro for game 1 following the double prize penalty, and Pedro being able to just take a big knockout on that Luminion using that Lost Mine attack from that Sableye.
Absolutely, and of course it was a mistake and it was penalized with a double prize penalty, but which helped Pedro to come back into this game, and I'm sure that Patrick is not happy about that. The tiny mistakes in top 4 could cost him potentially entering the final here. So yeah, you want to make sure that even in this late stage of the tournament you have enough stamina, enough energy to focus and make sure that this tiny mistakes which cause a double prize penalty won't cost you the finals.
Yeah, and here we go. We're just showing you the bracket now. Unfortunately, we won't be able to showcase Pauke and Telian's Yuri into the final here, as Alex Szymanski has been able to take the victory in top 4, putting himself into the finals and in a position where a US player is coming over to take over our European regionals, just the same way that Tour de Tours had done over in the States.
Yeah, we talked about this in the last game. Absolutely right. Alex coming back for revenge, wants to take one title that we stole from America back to America by winning the Warsaw regionals here. Actually, the first in Poland we had. So really interesting to see that he made it this deep, this far into the tournament, making it into the finals, considering he had to fly over from NA, also get used to the new time zone. So potentially some players might fly in early, get the jet lag out, and then be ready to play. But of course, Alex Szymanski, such an experienced player, has played so many tournaments in the past and can go back to that experience and play events all over the world.
Yeah, so that does mean we will be seeing Giratina in the final, one of our decks that make up the 25% or over 25% of our day 2 meta. So I got it slightly wrong a little bit earlier when I said Lost Zone Toolbox, but that's absolutely fine. It's the same sort of engine, but of course has that big attacker, that Giratina, to be able to take big knockouts where it needs to. So congratulations to Alex. We'll be seeing him shortly in the final, but we'll be seeing who potentially may be able to join us in the final in our current matchup as well.
Absolutely. We already featured the Giratina QRM matchup in the finals of the seniors division, so it would be really nice to see maybe a replay in the finals here if Patrick makes it through game 2 and game 3 here in the semifinals. And I feel like we're about to start right into that game 2 action.
Yep, and here we go. This is game 2 of our top 4 feature match at the regionals in Warsaw, looking to try and identify the next finalist to join Alex Szymanski to see who will be crowned the champion of this tournament after 2 days of play. We will start off with Patrick being able to go first, having unfortunately lost game 1, has already used concealed cards, it looked like, with that water energy in the discard pile, gets the manual attachment, does have access to things like quick ball at the moment, so just kind of identifying his options, working out his game plan. Plenty of time for this game 2, as well, with 40 minutes on the clock, over 40 minutes on
Absolutely.
the clock.
It's interesting to see that he didn't opt for that Empoleon with the quick ball. Actually, we haven't quite talked about the prize cards yet, but we see Roxanne. Yeah, 2 Melanies, a boss, escape rope on Patrick's side, and Pedro actually has, yeah, there's a Lost Vacuum, which might come into effect at the end when he wants to get rid of his own Path of the Peak to be able to use Charizard's attack. Other than that, quite fair on prizes, nothing too out of ordinary.
Yeah, just to confirm as well, we mentioned the time, of course. We will also try and confirm for you guys at home after that sort of judge call whether any additional time may have been added on or already has been factored in. We'll just make sure to confirm that. Already been done, actually. So it is the 41 minutes on the clock, giving maximum time there for both players to try and finish the series, to be able to get full games out, really. And we do pass back over to Pedro now with that Battle VIP pass, instantly going for that Cramorant, and looks like the Comfy does have that Sableye in the active spot.
I think it's actually Manaphy.
Oh,
yeah,
sorry, it was Manaphy. Apologies, I saw blue. And I got, in all the lights, I just saw blue, and that was all it. Apologies for that, everyone.
Yeah, but of course how important the Manaphy is this early in the game, because we have that Radiant Greninja on the field that could potentially snipe 2 of the single prizes, but Manaphy right on from the first turn on, make sure that Pedro doesn't have to fear that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So yeah, that Manaphy just being able to make sure that the Greninja is available for him, just not being able to be attacked by that Radiant Greninja. So just kind of making sure he's able to play through those matches and that game plan as well. Just kind of making sure that he's covering all bases right now. So just going to see how he's going to be looking at trying to get that Comfy into the active spot. Already has an escape rope in hand. Instantly switches and starts the Lost Zone count.
Yeah, there we go. Flower select coming. Let's see if Pedro gives us a chance to look at it. Actually not. He's quite secret with his flower selection. So we can only wait until we get confirmation which card he decides to actually discard into the lost zone and how he enriches his hand. We see a double cross switcher. That is a Clara potentially.
Looks like a Roxanne as well, and not in English language. So potentially there are just a few different options that aren't really playable right now. We'll be looking for a few more options where possible. So just does Lost Zone that Battle VIP pass, believing that path to the peak going to be really important for himself. Does use the double cross switcher to bring that active Palkia V. With Patrick not having the Kyurem V, which may not necessarily be required right now anyway, because it doesn't need a big attacker. Just needs something efficient to be able to continue stream attackers going through Pedro's deck. And there is another flower selecting, getting rid of that Marnie into the Lost Zone. And there's the Colress, which was the other option. So it was an easy choice for him.
Easy choice this early on. You want to make sure you increase your Lost Zone counter, of course. So he goes for that Colorless Experiment. Spreads out 5 cards on the table and make sure he's not overdrawing, of course, looking at the cards and now looking back at his hand, making sure he's picking the right free card to continue the chain, potentially getting his Lost Zone counter even further up, maybe getting access to a Cramorant as well that could attack in this turn if he has the Colress and 2 flower availabilities, which is exactly on the board at the moment.
Yeah, so really important decisions now. He's eyeing up, keeping hold of that cross switcher, and also just kind of that fog crystal, just kind of give him options. It looks like that Cramorant there, as you mentioned before. Well, I tried to mention before seeing actually it was the Manaphy after being told off. So there is the Comfy just going into the Lost Zone there. So does have an attacker now. Could still use, I believe, an energy attached to the active config to retreat.
And that's
so
exactly what he's going for with that fog crystal.
Yeah.
Picking out a psychic energy, attaching to the active, manually retreating and getting 110 damage out on that Palkia.
Yeah, so just kind of looking to try and apply as much pressure as early as possible. So it's really just kind of making sure we're going to be able to really apply as much pressure as possible there from Pedro on Patrick's side of the board, because that turn 1 wasn't the super strongest at all. But we'll maybe look to try and get another energy eventually when it comes back across to him to just start taking some prizes. Patrick there just kind of looking just at Pedro's board as he makes all these micro decisions that's going to be needed from the flower selecting and Colress's experiment and sort of that retreat here going into the attack shortly.
Yeah, there's the manual retreat for the psychic energy, making sure he hasn't attached any energy before, getting the Cramorant active spit innocently for 110 damage, and most importantly, because the Palkia V only has 220, if Patrick doesn't find a way to evolve it, then a second spit innocently would actually take it out.
Yeah, and Pedro also plays down the path to the peak to try and limit any sort of Radiant Greninja concealed card shenanigans as well. Also limiting the Palkia V-Star Star Portal ability to kind of limit that ability to actually come into the game as well, to get those energies out of the discard pile. But just starts off with the Irida. Oh, just a little table shake there, just possibly from the actual cameras or the actual table itself. But there it is. There's the V-Star and also 2 energies from the Capacious Bucket, just to kind of get things going.
Yeah, just so powerful how that Irida gets you like up to like 4 cards. We saw that so many times. One water Pokemon can be any water Pokemon, so it can be evolutions as well. So the Palkia V-Star will hit the field. On top of that, the Capacious Bucket gives you 2 energies out. Thanks to the path to the peak that you mentioned out, concealed cards is not an option here. Empoleon's ability, and also most importantly, that Star Portal is also not available. But having energies in hand that you can manually attach for the second attachment on the Palkia allows you to go for that subspace as well. And yeah, his own bench might be quite empty with only that Greninja and the Empoleon. However, we see a Lost Vacuum right at the right time, getting rid of the path to peak, gives you access to the concealed cards, which gets you more cards overall from your deck into your hand. And then I think we'll see an evolution, a second manual attachment, and an attack that takes out the Cramorant here.
Yeah, and with that Palkia V-Star still being out of range of a lot of damage, only taken 110 already, so still got 170 HP, and none of Pedro's Pokemon right now will be able to do that amount of damage. Looks like Patrick might be trying to go down the route of using the Palkia V-Stars to attack alongside the Empoleon V potentially to try and limit Pedro's side of the board. Pedro just confirming the discard cards there. And also, we've just kind of seen Patrick already lost zoning one of those Kyurem Vs of his own through his own lost vacuum. So back over to Pedro now. Patrick has initiated the prize race, having now gone down to 5 prizes, and Pedro is going to be on the back foot, but that's kind of expected with this deck.
Yeah, I think the next few key important parts for Pedro here are: can he access another colorless experiment, increase the lost zone count any further? There's a balloon that could be attached to the active Comfy to get a second flower selection, and I feel like that's exactly what's happening here. Retreating that thanks to the free retreat cost, thanks to the balloon, going for a second flower selection and hoping to draw into that colorless experiment.
Yeah, so here's a second flower flower selecting. I think that was a colorless, and an easy choice again. If that Drapion is there, gone straight into the lost zone, not useful in this matchup at all. So obviously the judges there also helping to put the counters up to 7 for their own following and for both players, and we've already got our counters on the screen as well. So there you go, there's the 5 cards that Pedro has picked up from the top of the deck. Now looking at some of the options, one easy choice there, that Battle VIP pass is definitely going in.
Absolutely, and I was going to talk about the pieces that he needs to actually finish this turn, and I think he wants to attack with that Sableye, so the Psychic Energy would be very important. Battle VIP pass plus potentially a Choice Belt could be discarded here, and then he could, or more so, he needs one more tool, and that is the withdrawal or like the option to retreat. I think there might be an Escape Rope as the 5th card in his hand that I saw there. That would be one option. Of course, would allow Patrick to promote one Pokemon of his choice, but since Sableye is spreading 100 over 12 damage counters, regardless of position of the Pokemon, that won't play as big of a role.
Yeah, definitely. We see the one-off Choice Belt go into the Lost Zone there, typically used to kind of help reach those extra damage and powerful, heavy, bulky Pokemon that Pedro may be facing to kind of help Charizard reach the 280 mark, helps Cramorant reach the 140 mark, and sometimes they do play a massive part, especially when you're beginning to set up damage across your opponent's board as well. So there's the attachment there from the Sableye, you know, sort of identifying that's probably the route that he wants to go down. There's just a pass for this turn, believing that should be okay.
Yeah, I think that the point we're missing is that the Lost Zone counter was only at 9. He was one short of actually using that Lost Mine. So yeah, he eventually ended up by passing the turn over. He knows that he's one flower selection away from activating that. But of course, this gives Patrick the option to gust up that Sableye and picking it out, but instead we see Melanie as the choice of supporter here. Of course, attaching one water energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon V, to one of your
V Pokemon.
V Pokemon, exactly, and drawing 3 cards on top of that. He seems to have drawn quite a few water energies and has more Melanie in hand, so drawing and like energy acceleration is definitely an option there, but beyond that, he just declares an attack and takes his second prize.
Yeah, it does have that. It did do that manual attachment to that Greninja, so maybe at one point eyeing that option to use a way of knocking out that Manaphy maybe, and then kind of using Greninja to kind of take 2 prizes very easily. Now, with this flower selecting, that does push Pedro into the 10 cards in the Lost Zone, which will activate that Lost Mine attack. We'll be getting rid of that Lost Vacuum, which is interesting because there is one more in his deck, and that is currently prized right at the top left there. But obviously valuing the additional cards that were available. Might have been that Clara. I believe that Clara's actually was in hand before, but obviously there was another card of value, of more value than that Lost Vacuum currently. So just going through the motions, going through the options right now, is playing the Clara here to pull back some important pieces, including, I believe, is that the Cramorant there and the Comfey?
Yeah, there could be two options to go into here, of course. I was wondering how he could map out the damage split all over the board. We saw that in the last game. He was setting up the split instantly KOs on the active Pokemon. He was dealing some damage to the bench so that it can also be picked up with both split instantly and more Lost Mine. But I'm interested to see which split he goes for beyond making sure that one more attack will be enough for that active Palkia.
Yeah, I'm sure Pedro is also quite aware, because Patrick is playing a very sort of combo-heavy deck. Typically, when you're trying to use Kyurem VMAX to attack bigger other Vs and VMAXs as well, using its own massive attack there, it doesn't really play many disruption cards, so it's just the one Roxanne. So maybe Pedro's thinking, maybe if I can get all my combo pieces into my hand before I even start taking prizes, because Roxanne doesn't activate until I've taken 3 prizes, and maybe that's the best way for me to come back and combo into the game when required. So there's the Cramorant coming into the bench spot. There's a scoop up net in the hand as well, ready to kind of move the Comfey out of position if necessary. Just checking a few options. I do see double cross switcher yet again in Pedro's hand, but there is the scoop up net being played on the active Comfey. Up comes, one's doing more damage with the 120, being able to spread damage across, or just being able to hit with the Cramorant. He goes for just a smack of Spit Instantly.
Spit Instantly, dealing 110 damage, would leave that Palkia with 60 HP remaining. But of course, you have the choice between the order of attacks, and we talk about sequencing so much over the weekend. Not only in which order you play your items, your supporter cards, and how you switch around your Pokemon, but also in which order you attack, especially when setting up the 2-hit knockouts or the 3-hit knockouts here. So 220 damage now. That could be a Lost Mine 60 split on that Palkia to pick that up in the next game. We also have to consider that Kyurem, or like more so Patrick, currently at 4 prizes remaining, will eventually go down to 2 and activate the Charizard. So I'm interested to see if Pedro manages to maybe pick up a knockout in the next turn, being down to 4 prizes, and then with back-to-back Charizards, giving him access to drawing the remaining 4 prizes before Patrick draws his remaining 2.
Yeah, definitely here. We're just seeing Patrick play out his turn. He's just got another energy attached with that Melanie to that Empoleon V. Again, trying to slow down maybe Pedro's side of the board. Maybe a little bit too late to try and necessarily use Emperor's Eyes to really slow down that board from Pedro, but does need that secondary attacker. Maybe hasn't really quite found that extra Palkia V-Star to evolve on the bench as well, but there will be a point where he's likely using that. Hasn't used the V-Star Star Portal ability as of yet, so still has access to that to power up itself. So it'll be interesting to see how Patrick is navigating this turn. Doesn't have a full bench, so can't really think about using that Collapse Stadium unique play yet either.
Absolutely. I was thinking another potential play for Pedro here would of course be using the cross switcher and gust up something that potentially is stuck in the active, which buys him 1 or 2 more turns to spread damage with the Lost Mine. I think I saw at least one cross switcher in his hand, and if through maybe Flower Selection, maybe another Colress experiment, maybe through either of these drawing mechanics, he could get the missing piece and then get something stuck in the active.
Yeah, definitely. And as you just saw, I believe, just as the judges are putting it back down now, there's that one-off escape rope that Patrick plays. Does play the balloon as well, but that Kyurem V is also quite a big tanky Pokemon. Does have quite a big retreat as well, so we'll need a card like that to get out of the active. So it's definitely an option. I'm sure that's going through Pedro's mind at the moment to start just kind of sprinkling some damage with that Lost Mine attack. But it's just coming down to how Patrick plays this out, really. So he's playing this Ultra Ball. Lots of cards in hand. Means again, he has lots of options, lots of energies in hand, which typically you see because, he's one of those few decks which plays many. Has 9 water energies and the 1 wash. So it'll be interesting to see how he's able to play this out as well. So there's 2 water energies being discarded right now, actually. Does have things like energy retrieval to get it back, the training court. One-off as well, so lots of different options.
Absolutely.
Available.
We talked about the other potential of that heavily damaged Polka V-Star, leaving the field through potentially a collapsed stadium. So I would not be surprised to potentially see the Star Portal retrieving some of these energies, loading or charging up more attackers, eventually finding a way back on the bench and then getting discarded by that collapsed stadium. Could definitely be an option here. Patrick already has his Empoleon almost charged up to 3 energies to attack with that. Instead decides to go with that Radiant Greninja. We talked about it a little bit. If he finds a way to maybe gust up that mana fee and Pedro doesn't have a way to retrieve it back and put it down, then this Moonlight Shuriken could also take out 2 prize cards and gets him even faster.
Yeah, definitely, especially when we've seen Pedro already use one of his Claras. Potentially may have seen the other one as well, but that second mana fee is also sitting in the lost zone right there, staring up at all of us. So it's really interesting to see how Patrick will be able to play this out. Does look like he's kind of manually attaching that Greninja currently. That's kind of been what's happening here with 3 Pokemon with 2 energy costs on it. Of course, Patrick may want to try and use the Greninja to kind of play the 7 prize game, try and give up 1 single prize if possible, because typically, other than that Cramorant, with 110 HP, the others have under 90 HP. So even if he just has to take 1 prize with it, it kind of puts him in a bit of a position where maybe he can utilize that going forward and making a really awkward spot. We do see the Star Portal in action here, getting full value this time in Game 2. 3 energies attachments to 3 different Pokemon there. So now has an Evoleon V with 3 energies, has a Greninja, Radiant Greninja with 3 energies, and there's the Subspace Swell from the active Palkia, who is on a bit of a threatened situation now because it's going to be potentially knocked out on the next turn.
Yeah, I think it was 2 spit innocently, so 220 damage, 60 left there. It was quite interesting. When I saw that Patrick filled up his bench for a second, I was thinking about the potential of getting the Star Portal energies, getting more attackers ready, and then using the Collapsed Stadium. But he announced the attack and now basically sacrifices active Polka V-Star, which will be ideally by Pedro be taken out at the end of the turn with an attack. But before all of that, we have another flower selection. The lost zone count at this point doesn't matter anymore. We have reached the benchmark of 10, giving access to the lost mine. We haven't actually seen it used yet. It was only spitting innocently from the Cramorant so far, thinning out the deck even further, making sure that all the cards that he might not use anymore get discarded into either the discard pile or the lost zone here. So yeah, all we're missing at this point is a way to retreat the active one and attacking with one of the 2 stabilized. Always great to have 2 attackers ready. If one is taken out, you can splat another 120 damage. So let's look at the math currently, right? 60 damage is required to take out the active Polka V-Star. And looking at the bench, there is actually a Crobat sitting at 180 HP.
Oh,
so if he takes another 60 damage on that, he would set up a KO, of course, with the next Lost Mine afterwards. He's using a cross switch.
Onto the bench, Kyurem V, which has that, as I mentioned before, that heavy retreat cost. Of course, with that Star Portal now already used as well by that Palkia, does have this Sableye in his active position, did bench that Sableye with the energy attachment in preparation for this Roxanne, and this is massive here from Pedro, because this is his comeback mechanic to go against such a deck, because you're going to be trying to force them not being able to draw additional cards or sort of play additional cards and kind of set up. Although Patrick does have a position where he has multiple energies on the board, it's just now trying to find a way to get rid of that active Kyurem V in that spot.
Yeah, I was looking at the options to actually retreat the active one. Looking at the energy count, Patrick is playing 9 water energies. If you look at the field, 3 on Greninja, 3 on Empoleon, 2 on the Palkia, and 1 on the actually 9 energies in play in total. Of course, through Lost Mine, 1 Palkia Vista will be taken out and 2 energies will be hitting the discard pile, which potentially could be retrieved there with the energy retrieval. Potentially, if he's playing that in his list, I see it as a one-off. The other retrieving options would be the Escape Rope, which is unfortunately priced, and we see a Balloon, which only reduces the retreat cost by 2, and Kyurem actually has a retreat cost of 3. 3 colorless energies there, so it would still not be enough to retreat it, actually.
Yeah, so we'll have to then find that wash energy to try and get that retreat alongside the air balloon. That's a lot being asked from Patrick's side of the board. I think Pedro just confirming exactly where he's going to be putting those lost mine damage counters as well, because he's going to need to start setting up attackers. He's already made the best possible play, I believe, because of bringing that QMV into the active spot. Really sort of testing Patrick on whether he has the right cards to actually be able to retreat. He's asking those questions. Do you have a way of retreating to one of your attackers and continue taking the final 3 prizes? If not, this is going to be me continuously sprinkling damage with that lost mine attack and just working out how I can continue taking the further 4 prizes after this knockout on this Palkia V-Star. So there it is, a knockout there with the 60 damage going on, and the 60, as you mentioned, but Barish just putting on that Crobat.
Yeah, actually quite proud of myself. Seeing throughout this game, I called the pulling up in one of the bulkier high retreat cost Pokemon up with the cross switcher play. He managed to get both pieces in hand. He had the Sableye ready to attack. He took out the Palkia and placed 60 damage on the Crobat there, which is ready to be taken out by another Lost Mine. So Pedro actually in a very commanding position, is in the driving seat for sure, is 2 attacks potentially away. We see the Melanie, of course, gets 1 attack, 1 energy from the discard pile on the active one and draws 3 cards. So potentially, with the 1 energy and a balloon, he could retreat. However, we see that he does not have the balloon, but he has a wash energy.
Does find that energy, yeah. Didn't find that balloon at all. I mean, it is just 1 card, and look at that deck. It looks big still. It doesn't look like it's necessarily gone through all of the pieces, despite having all 9 energies or basic energies out on the board already. There's still plenty to go through, but does use that wash energy with that concealed cards. Won't be able to get that back, of course, because it is a special energy, and doesn't look like he finds it. Finds an Ultra Ball, so could potentially put himself in a position where he has a pretty tanky Pokemon, but not really ideal right now.
Yeah, you talked about how big the deck still is, and this is where thinning the deck comes into effect. Playing the Ultra Ball, getting 1 further Pokemon out of the deck. Then we saw the Oranguru in hand and another one ready to be picked out of the deck. Of course, this will give you access to 1 more card. So he makes sure that he reduces the amount of cards in his deck to increase the odds of accessing that balloon.
Yeah, so he's looking at trying to thin out his deck, take that extra Oranguru, the second one. He has 1 in hand already. Did identify all 3 of the Collapse Stadium is currently sitting in his deck. You know, that would be really important if he's able to Oranguru Primate Wisdom into one of those cards, because then he could just mitigate that Crobat damage here. He's going to pray for that 1 card, see if he's going to get it. Just checks. Doesn't look like it. Unfortunate. I mean, like I said, it's quite difficult. There's the Ordinary Rod coming into play as well. There's going to be at least 1 energy coming back into the deck, making his deck a little bit bigger again.
I was just going to say, like, we've just thinned out the deck, so now putting at least 2 or like 1 Pokemon and maybe an energy back gets you more cards into your deck. So it's interesting to see that he opts to add the Palkia. Maybe he has a plan by reducing his hand count. But maybe he also wants to shuffle, give him higher odds. We actually saw the balloon in there for a second. So, yeah, these are quite difficult situations for Patrick to be in. And, yeah, like massive props to Pedro, seeing through this game, seeing so far into this game, finding options to play around and setting up the long game here, basically. Setting up, being able to use Lost Mine eventually, but also know when to pull up, want to gust up that Kyurem and then start spreading the damage.
Yeah, that's just a quick pass over back from Patrick over to Pedro. We were just both double-checking that QMV obviously does have a first attack, but it's where you use it to rapid freeze and attach further water energies from your hand. But we've already seen all those energies across the board and in the discard already. So it's just back over to Pedro, where he's now taking the initiative. He's probably going to go ahead and prizes right now, use his Chorus Experiment to further increase his Lost Zone card numbers, but at this point it's just all about combo pieces. So he's just going to be looking to maybe get another Sableye down. There it is, with another Psychic Energy. That's going to be his route to victory here. You know, just by taking the 120 onto the Crobat, he'll be going down to 2 prizes, and then just a couple of more sprinkles and maybe he'll take the game.
Yeah, we're currently looking at 2 more pieces that will be crucial here. That is the Radiant Charizard in his deck and also the Magma Basin. 2 important cards that he wants to access later on in the game. Actually gets that's actually his hand, excuse me. He has all these pieces in his hand already. He also sets up a third Sableye there, so he has another option to go for the Lost Mine attack. And it makes me wonder, looking at this game set, yes, I said that Pedro would be in a good position to set up more attackers, but maybe he was overextending a little bit by filling up his bench, maybe with a Kyurem that was potentially not needed in this matchup, and then leaving him open for that cross-switcher play.
Yeah, it's possibly one of those oversights that happen. You know, sometimes when you're playing a deck which is actually usually focused around a Kyurem VMAX, you're typically trying to keep going back to it when you can, but obviously you have to change up his strategy, use that Palkia V-Star to attack initially, start taking a number of prizes, but now sort of putting himself in a bit of a detrimental position because of that Kyurem in the active spot with just one energy. It's just having to pass back. It's looking really unfortunate here for Patrick at the moment, and Pedro's just going to try and take advantage of that.
Of course, Pedro now in a really great spot. His bench is filled, but I think I saw 2 escape ropes and 2 of the scoop-up nets, actually, to potentially pick up Pokemon. I don't know exactly where his fire energies are hidden at the moment. I don't see any in the Lost Zone. I don't have full access to his discard pile. Maybe they are in the deck. There would be one way to access them, of course. He's looking at his deck size. It currently looks like 6 cards or 5 cards remaining
5
there.
cards, it looks like.
So the amount of turns he has left are actually limited.
Yeah, they are limited, but at the same time, if all he needs to do is just keep putting Lost Mine damage counters on the right Pokemon, maybe he needs to spread it out a little bit just in case Patrick draws into something like the Collapse Stadium and has another Pokemon in hand. So he just needs to consider a few of his options here. We did mention before, if he does get that Fire Energy into the discard pile, that Charizard's actually able to attack when only 3 prizes are taken, because that Magma Basin attachment, although putting 2 damage counters on the Charizard, will allow to activate and give Charizard an option to then just manually attach from hand that additional energy cost to use that Combustion Blast attack, I believe it's called.
Yeah, we don't see the fire energy in the discard pile. We just had a look over there. We don't see them in the prizes. Haven't spotted them in the Lost Zone either. So it might be that's why he might have spread out the deck cards. Be like, hey, I only do have 5 cards remaining, and there might be my fire energies in there. So if I eventually draw into them, I have a great option. He actually retweets, manually retweets, or was that a scoop up net? It seems like it was a scoop up net, the way he lifted it up. And it seems like he wants to use Flower Selection.
Yeah, it's maybe just digging through for that fire energy now, because that Kyurem, you know, only having 220 HP does put that Clara in there. Just basically means it's in range of a Charizard right now, and so it just needs the fire.
And we actually saw a fire energy being pulled out and discarded with the quick ball. So now it's in the discard pile. Magma Basin gives him access to that through the discard pile. And all he needs is one more Flower Selection, pick up his last 2 cards, take the fire energy or any energy he already has in hand, playing down the Charizard, and this seems like path to victory, and Pedro might be our second finalist of the weekend. He's playing down the Charizard, he's using the ability of Magma Basin, 20 damage counter, won't really change anything. He has a second energy in hand, and only the last piece remaining is that scoop up net to pick up the remaining one, and Patrick shakes his head. He knows the game is over, taking 250 damage, taking out the Kyurem, and congratulations to Pedro making such a deep run, being our second finalist of the weekend.
Yeah, fantastic performance by Pedro there. We see him there with his Lost Box deck, being able to use the Radiant Charizard to fantastic effect to be able to, 1, take the win in Game 2, and just as that, I'm going to be joined by my other co-caster. We're just going to wish Barish the best of luck traveling back, as I'm joined back again with Mike Ellis.
Hello. Hello.
Did you get a chance to catch that game at all?
I did. I've been teleporting all around the arena, just seeing what's going on, and I've teleported onto the stage here. Barish has done an amazing job carrying this show right here, but unfortunately has to go, so I'm popping in here. It's nice to see everyone.
It's always good to have you back. It was fantastic, obviously, casting with Barish. That top 4 match, it was riveting. Back and forth in Game 1. Obviously, penalized by that little double prize loss there, kind of putting the emphasis on Pedro being able to take the win in Game 1. And Game 2, just unfortunate to have that big, bulky Kyurem V in the active spot where...
So much hit points, isn't it, to get with the Lost Box?
Exactly. I mean, just having to announce 6 attacks does seem very efficient, but sometimes you just can't do it. You're just going to be constantly pressured by single prizes, and then Pedro was able to take the dub because of that Radiant Charizard coming into play with that Magma Basin, and then just dealing 250 damage just like that.
Yeah, and what we love to see with the Lost Box is how consistent it seems to be. That flower selecting, the only real disruption we've seen for it was stuff like the Empoleon earlier on in the tournament. Other than that, it just seems to hit those marks every single time when flowing through, and it's just that scary factor of one prize, one prize, one prize, and then the Charizard comes out and takes 2 prizes all in one hit. So interesting result there.
Yeah, like I said, congratulations again to Pedro. He'll be facing with his Lost Box deck against Giratina Lost Zone box again in the finals of this Warsaw Regionals. And just with that,